how you doing? Welcome back to my channel. I wanted to just sit on the ground today. Welcome to my May wrap up. I think this has been the month of the year so far I've read the most books because I got to 14 books this month, which is great, mostly because of course I had that 24-hour readathon in there with Carolyn. I will leave the video linked up above if you want to check it out, but I got to read I think 8 books in a day, so that pretty much explains the total fiasco that was this month's reading. But essentially I'm just gonna get right into it. So we have one DNF, and I do want to start kind of like talking more about books that I DNF because I don't ever really, which is just strange. But this month, I'm so sad to say that my DNF was The City of Brass. No, I'm so heartbroken about it. So I did DNF The City of City of Bass. Yes, this was actually my second time putting this book down. I feel like this is now going to be my permanent DNF of The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty because I picked this book up a couple years ago. This was a gift from Lucy over at Crescent Pages. Thank you so much. I picked it up on audiobook the first time around, wasn't into it. That was like 2 years ago, and then I put it down, and then this month I was like, you know what, no, let's just get into it. Like, look how beautiful it is, and I just really wanted to read it, and then I picked it up on audiobook again, and I just did not get into the story at all. I tried reading along physically with it a couple times, and it just was not working. I think for me, what doesn't work in this book and why I just couldn't finish it was definitely the writing and the tone. This is a fantasy about a girl named Nari who lives in 19th century Cairo, 18th century Cairo, and she has like some weird abilities that she's never been able to really chalk up to anything. She's always just kind of ignored them, and so she makes her living off of swindling people, like selling them trinkets or amulets or like curing them, providing them with cures that are just completely fake. But then one day she accidentally summons a djinn, and it kind of just ruptures her world and invites her into this whole new world that she's never experienced. She starts to learn more about her powers, like where she came from and stuff like that, and eventually we go on an adventure to the City of Brass. Something I didn't know as well is that this book is split between 2 different perspectives because we have Nari, who's of course journeying with the djinn or the deva that she has summoned, but then in the City of Brass we have another character named Ali who we follow, who is very much of the prominent political doings of the city and stuff like that, and I actually really enjoyed his chapters far more than Nari's. I feel like I could have kept going if it was just Ali's chapters, but I really didn't like Nari's chapters. The tone, the writing was very much just it felt very young adult to me, first of all, but I think it was just so standard, so basic. A writing that comes up a lot in young adult books and in a lot of younger pitched fantasy books, I think, where it's just so standard. The sentences that are used and the formulas and everything like that, like it really just feels like it could have been written by anyone. The pacing is always the same. I really felt like the characters were very flat, actually. It just felt like they were like plot devices. This book, I would say, is very plot heavy, and I feel like I had no idea who the characters were. I didn't have any time to get attached to them, and so I just didn't care what was happening overall, and I just couldn't keep going with it, and I'm so sad because I've heard that it gets really, really good, but this was my second time now, so I just don't think it's the book for me. So yeah, if you love The City of Brass, so freaking happy for you. I really wanted it to work out for me, but alas, it did not. And then we have the rest of the books that I read in May. The first one that I finished, this was a carryover from April. I'm so sad that I'm done this book, but also so happy because I finally finished Beautiful Nightmares by KJ Sutton. Can we just take a minute? Like, look at this. I cannot stress to you how much I love self-published fantasy books. They just have the nicest feeling covers. Like, it's that very buttery, glossy feeling. Like, I love it. I love it so much. But I finally finished this glorious book. This is the 4th book in the Fortuna Sworn series, which I have been rereading this year because I wanted to get to this one, which came out in January, and I finally did. I got to read this like over my exam period in school and then carry it with me into May, and it was just so good. I think this is definitely now my favorite Fortuna Sworn book in the series. I would rank them in their order. Like, I honestly just think each book gets better. So I would rank them like 1, 2, 3, 4. And now this is my favorite book in the series. And it was also the longest. And I honestly just hope they keep getting longer and longer because oh, I just got gel nail on the top. I really rushed through my nails so I could have them done for this video because I find it very satisfying to look at people's nails. But now I've got gel nail polish on the top of my book. This book to me felt really different from the other books in the series, actually. Like, it just had a whole new flavor, and it just felt like it's just been so amazing to see KJ Sutton like kind of just change a little bit with every book. Like, each of them I think has a really distinct tone. Something that I find so impressive is her characters. I think that's really what holds this whole series together, is really every single person. This world has a huge cast of characters. Fortuna is a nightmare, if I haven't already explained that somewhere already, which means that she can sense your darkest fears, use it against you, and throughout the series, like, her powers have just been changing, evolving. And she also has to deal with both the Seelie and the Unseelie courts of Fae, along with every other supernatural creature you could think of. Easy to read, easy to love, easy to appreciate, but also so emotionally harvesting. Like, this book harvests your emotions. It like feeds on you, which is so impressive because you feel something, or at least I felt something towards every single character in this book, as small as that character may be, in whatever little scenes they appear, whether that character is a huge villain or our main protagonist. Like, you just feel so much. I'm literally just so invested. This is the only series that I like actively keep up to date on and try to read the next book as soon as it comes out, which I'm so sad that obviously I'm gonna have to do a little bit of waiting now, but it is so worth it. I would say if you do pick up the first one, just keep pushing past it, because I was not in love with the first Fortuna Sworn book, mainly because it has a lot of elements in fantasy and fantasy romance that I'm not a fan of, but they just keep getting better and better. This book we got to learn a lot about one of our main characters, and I just fell in love because this book focuses a lot on one of my favorite characters in the series, who is Laura Lee. I feel like I want to give this 5 stars, 4.5. It now has like one of my favorite quotes ever. Where is it? Seize the day, detain the evening, torture the night. Okay, so now I'm gonna zoom through my 24-hour readathon books that I got to read with Carolyn, because I kind of talked about them all in that vlog. We're gonna start with Heartstopper because oh my god, I had a great reading month, and I really hope you did too. Please let me know what you read, but yeah, I've seen so many people picking this up. Heartstopper, I read volumes 1, 2, and 3 during the readathon, all in the span of 24 hours. And this was a series, a graphic novel series that I would never have ever picked up if it weren't for Carolyn and her being like, you need to read this, because I just did not think they were for me at all. I'm really not a fan of like very, I guess, light, fluffy, like sweet romance. It's just not really my thing. I don't know why. I find it boring. What is wrong with me? I picked this up and I was so apprehensive because I didn't think I liked the art style. I didn't think I would like the story. I wasn't really interested in high school romance, but I picked up the first one, feeling so ambivalent, and by the time I got halfway through the book, like, I was just a puddle. I was just a puddle of mushy, gushy love. Like, this series legitimately made my heart explode. So coming from someone who never thought they would love the series, who didn't want to pick it up, who didn't want to go near it, who thought it was not for me, I fell in love with it, and I gave all of them 4 stars. The second one I love the most. I gave this 4.5, but if you are unfamiliar with this graphic novel series, it's by Alice Oseman. It's about these 2 boys in high school. We're mainly following our 2 protagonists. We have Charlie, who is openly gay at high school, and you follow him around like through the huge difficulties that he faces. And then we have another boy we're following named Nick, who is like the star rugby player, and he's very much seen in their school, I guess, as the opposite of Charlie. And so a friendship between them, or a relationship of any sort, is something that no one would expect and everyone just kind of scoffs at. But this series does obviously follow Nick and Charlie and their relationship, and it is just, I felt so many things that a book has never been able to make me feel before. I bawled my eyes out after I finished reading the 3rd one. Like, I'm just so glad Carolyn was there for me after finishing each and every one, because the second one was my favorite, I think, just because it was so gorgeous and like wholesome. But what I really love about the series is that it's not wholesome in that, like, it's fluffy, but the fluff is empty. That for me is one of the reasons why I don't really like sweet and sappy romance, because to me a lot of it just feels so empty, so void. But Heartstopper manages to be fluffy, but like keep this like really dense ball of everything important, of like super deep, hard to talk about topics at its core, and surrounds it with fluff and the love and the stuff of everyday life. And it's so impressive because like you have this whole little formation, little amalgamation of everything that Heartstopper is, and each part just complements each other so well. I just loved it. It just sparked so much like genuine, wonderful discussion between Carolyn and I. I'm so grateful for her, so grateful for this series, and I don't want to even read the 4th one now because I just don't want it to be over. But anyway, highly recommend. These are some of my favorite reads of this month. Thank you once again, Carolyn, my lovely, beautiful best friend, for recommending these to me. So those were the first ones I read, those 3 books during the readathon. And then the next one, because we were swapping books, like recommending to each other books that we really like that we thought the other would like. So the next one Carolyn recommended to me and that I read is Upstream by Mary Oliver, which is selected essays. First of all, I am in love with this cover. I'm just in love with it. So I picked up Upstream. I've never read Mary Oliver before. I think I should also probably try out some of her poetry because I think on the whole I just didn't really jive with this collection. I still gave it 3.5 stars because there was really gorgeous lines. I think the earliest essays were definitely my favorite. So essentially this collection is kind of split between the natural world and the first half of the collection has essays in which Mary Oliver talks about nature and her relationship to nature, and then the second half kind of delves more into more literary essays. So she talks a lot about American writers and just various aspects of their life. There's philosophy, their work, people like Walt Whitman, is Emerson in here, I think. A lot of transcendentalism, which is nice because that's actually where I am right now in my American lit course. So stuff like that and just people who have inspired her. I just think my overall just like thing that I didn't click with is that you kind of know stepping into someone's work when their voice catches you off guard and says things that like really hit deep within you. I think the reason this got 3.5 stars is because while I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's beautiful. That's really nice. Yes, that's wonderful. But I think a lot of the sentiments, especially in her earlier essays, were things that I had kind of already come across in reading other people who I think actually expressed it better. For example, when people like Rilke write things down, it just like hits you square in your soul, and I didn't feel that in this collection. And this was also a gift from one of you guys, so thank you so much. Then I read The Invention of Hugo Cabaret by Brian Selznick. This was also recommendation by Carolyn. This is one of her favorite books ever. I had previously seen the film. Hugo is actually one of my favorite, is it one of my favorite movies? I don't know, I haven't seen it in so long, but when I was little I would rewatch that movie obsessively, and I actually ended up enjoying the film more than the novel. So the novel Hugo is split between a regular, novel format, but so much of this as well is just illustrated. I was actually not a fan of the art style either, so that took away from the enjoyment, and I just think the film, since this is a book about movies, I just think the film captured a lot of things so much better. But I did find the art style and the way it was presented to be really good at capturing the kind of heart of cinema that is talked about in Hugo, because basically we follow this young boy. He is an orphan. His father has left him behind this automaton that is broken, but he's been trying to get it to work for a really long time, and since he's also an orphan, he lives in the Paris train station, and he essentially is responsible for winding the clocks and making sure all the clocks are on time in the train station. But then he comes across a toy maker at the train station who isn't really all he appears to be. It's just like this huge adventure that ties in with the automaton, with, I guess, the train station, the toy maker, film, cinema, the beginnings of film as we know it, and it's just like a really sweet, really educational, really cool story, and I do really love it. So I did give it 4 stars, but overall I think it does, in my opinion, pale in comparison to the movie. Maybe it's just because I watched the movie first, but I adore the film so much. So that is Hugo. And to finish off the readathon, I did read 3 little books. So first up, I just zoomed through Eric by Shantan. There's really not a lot to say here. This is my second Shantan book. I really do like Shantan's illustrations. I just think they're so sweet. So this is about a little creature named Eric, who is a foreign exchange student who comes to stay with a family, and it's about, I guess, his time there, but it's literally just 30 pages long, so I didn't really get too much out of it, but it was still very sweet. And this one was a gift from Jen over at Jen Campbell. You should totally check out her YouTube. Thank you so much. I read Mirabai's Ecstatic Poems. This was a gift that came to my P.O. Box. I never knew it existed until it was sent from Mari. Thank you so much. She said that these are one of my favorites, so hopefully you like them too. I did really like these. So essentially Mirabai lived in 1498, and she kind of just ditched the whole scene of things that were prescribed to her as a woman, both stuff that her family wanted, that her religion wanted, and she just kind of went her own way and started to write these poems that were essentially well, ecstatic poems, but also kind of worshipping and love poems to Krishna, who she calls the Dark One. And yeah, they're just so, they're so sensual, they're so beautiful. I really enjoyed reading this collection. Is there anything else from Mirabai out, like, in the world possible for me to get my hands on? I'm not sure if this is the only collection that has survived. I really have no idea. There's so many beautiful lines, like the Dark One threw me a glance like a dagger today. Or, how long did I stand in the house of this body and stare at the road? out, you know? So I really, really like this. So glad I got to pick this up, and thank you so much, Mari. The last book of poetry that I started during the readathon and then finished a little while later was Poems Tonight by Rilke. This was a gift from Michael. Thank you so much. First of all, this edition is so gorgeous. And I'm very surprised, so surprised to tell you that I think this might be my least favorite Rilke work that I've read to date. I know. But of course, because it's Rilke, I still love this tremendously, although I'm so surprised that I gave it 3 stars. So this collection, Poems Tonight, includes both like these, oh my god. So this collection includes stuff that he was writing around the same time as the Duino elegies, but then it also just comprises like random sketches and little bits and bobs around nighttime and the night. I didn't really dog-ear too many of these, which is so sad. This one, I just felt like it didn't really speak to me as much as a lot of his later work, which is so surprising. Maybe it's because I'm not a huge fan of the Duino elegy time frame Rilke who exists in that point in time writing. The Duino elegies, when I read it a long time ago, is not also on my top favorite Rilke work, so that might be why. But I just think like this one really didn't communicate too much to me, and a lot of them are so short. They're just like little brief flashes in the night, and I did read this all at nighttime before bed, which may have also contributed because I might have been sleepy, but I still love this. Let me just read you one because I can't badmouth Rilke. I love him, but I just think there's actually like so much more exquisite Rilke to read than Poems Tonight if you're looking for a collection. I'd recommend the Book of Hours. I just love the Book of Hours. We have abandoned our gods for moldering waste, for gods do not beguile. They have being, and nothing but being, abundance of being, but not a scent, not a sign. Nothing is so mute as a god's mouth. And then the final read of my 24-hour readathon was an audiobook that I picked up, and that was Poison for Breakfast by Lemony Snicket. This was just always a time. If you've read Lemony Snicket, you know what to expect, and this was potentially the most Lemony Snicket infused book I've ever read in my life. I have completed all but like the last 3 of the Unfortunate Event series, and then I did start, where it's right here, I did start All the Wrong Questions, which is his other middle grade series, but I've only read the first one. Poison for Breakfast is a book, he describes it as a book of philosophy, and it is essentially kind of mystery, philosophy. It's just rambling. It's just Lemony Snicket going for a good long tangent, the whole book long. It was not my favorite thing ever. I gave it 3 stars, but because it's Lemony Snicket, like it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just a brand that I think I will always be like, yeah, I'll just read it, you know, I'll just pick it up, why not? It's Lemony Snicket. So it is about a writer, it's Lemony Snicket, who sits at his kitchen table, and all of a sudden this note slides under his door while he's eating breakfast, and he always has the exact same breakfast of like poached eggs, toast, a pear, coffee, and something. But this note slips under his door, and he reads the note, and it says, "You had poison for breakfast." And so he sits there and he's like, oh my god, I've been poisoned. Like, what could have been poison that I ate? And so this note launches him on an adventure throughout his little hometown, like sourcing all of the materials, all of the food materials from his breakfast and seeing which one could have been poisoned, because of course he doesn't just call 911. He isn't just like, I've been poisoned, help me. He's like, who knows how long I have left to live. I need to solve the mystery of my own poisoning now. And so you follow him going to like the sea where they got the sea salt, going to the beehives where they keep the honey, going to just like tea shops, coffee shops, and being like, are you the one who poisoned me? And he just kind of like learns these philosophical truths and morals, and it's just a good rambling time. So anyway, that was Poison for Breakfast. I'd recommend the audiobook. I think I would not have read this if I had the physical copy, because the audiobook is narrated by Kronk. You know who I'm talking about. Next book that I read, now we're out of the readathon, thank goodness, I picked up Graceling by Kristen Cashore. I love this. I love this so much. This is the first book in a young adult fantasy series, and I loved it. This is a very old series, but apparently it's still going. One of my friends was like obsessed with this back in 2012, and I've only just picked it up now, and I really, really like this. I was so impressed with the world in Graceling. In this fantasy world, there are 7 kingdoms, and in this world as well, there are people called graces or gracelings, and they are born with a grace, so a certain affinity or inclination towards something. It could be benign, like cooking, not really benign, but you know, not seen as super scary, like cooking or dancing or singing. But in Katsa's case, who is our character that we're following, she has been graced with combat and fighting and the stabby. So she is basically just used and abused by her uncle, who is the king of one of the 7 kingdoms, and he just uses her as essentially like his attack hound. And so if he wants to torture information out of someone, if he wants to assassinate somebody, if he just wants to scare someone into doing what he wants them to do, he sends his niece Katsa on a little errand to frighten them to death because she just can't be beaten. What I will say though, if that sounds unrealistic, I think this book was really, really good at balancing and like nerfing its fantasy powers, because it's not like she is just this like uncontrollable being. Like she can be taken down if she's like surrounded by a group of huge men, but if she has to fight like 6 people at once, she can do it. And it was just like very, very cool. Something else I really appreciated was that the grace, which is obviously the main form of kind of magic or power in this fantasy world, was something that just like, it wasn't just static, it wasn't like this set rule, because people in this world really fear graces. There's this huge stigma towards them, and so it's not something that's really been studied too much. And so you see Katsa along with another boy who's Prince Po, who is the prince of obviously another kingdom. Their graces like aren't these static defined things, like they shift and they change, and they start to learn more about their graces and themselves. And so it's not just like this like one thing, it's like something that they are in the process of figuring out, which I thought was really cool, because I haven't seen a lot of fantasy worlds where that is the case. Like I feel like the protagonist is usually just dumped down, found out they have this power, and that's like it. That's the power. It doesn't change throughout the whole book. But this one was so interesting because it also coincided with like a journey of self-discovery as well, because Katsa eventually breaks free from her abusive uncle, and she finds out there's so much more out there because her and Prince Po essentially team up because someone has kidnapped Po's grandpa. It definitely felt so nostalgic because it is an older young adult fantasy, but I just loved the characters so much. I really liked the writing. I found the pacing was a little bit slow at times, I will say. I think it was a little bit too long for what it was, but I just think like I really appreciated the realistic and the grounding effects of this world, as well as that changing magic system. And I think as well there was just really good representation of abuse, of injury, and also, can I just say, a really good concussion representation. There was good brain injury representation, because I'm just so tired of reading fantasy books where people absolutely get bonked about, knocked around, and someone is like, oh my god, you have a concussion, but then 2 hours later they are back on their feet, completely fine. It's never mentioned again. It's not a source of trauma for them, and I know that exists. I know people do get concussions like that where they're just these minor little blips, but you know, for others of us it takes years, and it's not something that is just like, I don't know, it's not something that's just there, thrown away. It's something that like you really see takes a toll on someone, and I had just never seen that in a fantasy book before, and it actually made me so emotional. So yeah, just good things all around. 4 stars, really liked it. I will definitely be continuing on with this series. Okay, and then I found a new favorite book of all time, so that was amazing. This was a gift from Jerry. Thank you so much. This is Pedro Powdermo, and this is so good, and you should read it. Multiple of you have recommended this to me now, but then I read somewhere that Gabriel Garcia Marquez was like so inspired by this book. I think he had at one point like all of it memorized. It is quite a short little tale, but this is one of the, I guess, is it one of the founding foundations of magical realism? But this is a piece of Mexican lit in which we follow this young man. His mother dies, and then his mom is like, yo, can you please go to my hometown, this little town called Kamala, and find your father, who is this guy named Pedro Powdermo, and like meet him, but essentially get revenge on him because he abandoned us, he made me raise you alone, and all of this stuff. And so her son is like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And that's where the story just disintegrates. Like literally that is the only vague premise I can give you, because we have like this one anchoring point in this world where we're in this room, we know we're in this room, we know the mom's like, go find your father, and as soon as he leaves the house, So from there, the story is split into competing narratives. We also switch back and forth between the past, it's over here, and the present, in which Juan is in this town trying to find his father. But while he's there, he meets a bunch of different people. Like, he meets them in an order as well. It's like a linear meeting. It's not like he can ever be with more than one person at a time, which was just so cool. So he meets this one man, and this one man is like, oh, go to this person's house. She'll take care of you. He gets to this person's house, and his whole reality of the time that he spent with the guy who he was traveling with is blown up and changed. I'm not really going to say too much about it because I think knowing almost nothing going into this book is definitely the right way, but this book is a ghost story, but it's so much more than that. It is about a town that has just been absolutely run rampant over by this insanely abusive, controlling tyrant who has just ruined the economy, the social atmosphere, the homeliness of the town, and essentially destroyed the lives of almost every single person in this town that Juan is going to, because when he gets there, it's kind of like a ghost town, and he's like, what's happened here? And eventually he starts to learn the story of what happened in his father's town. But he learns it in a way that is so discombobulating, because this is a town that, it's a ghost town that is obviously alive with memory. The whole town is, it's on the synopsis, so it's not a spoiler, but the whole town is populated by whispers and memories, and so this whole book is like one weird fever dream, and it has these wonderful, just like very abrupt breaks in narration where we switch, and sometimes it's so hard to discern who is talking, and so you end up feeling exactly like Juan as he's listening to who knows who talking about some detail, and so you have to kind of piece together all these things that you're hearing into a cohesive picture, because there's definitely a cohesive big picture here. And it's all the little like stories and whispers that come out of like the cracks in the wall or the floorboard, or at night like strange people creeping by your bed. You kind of get a sense of what went down in this town. It's just so good. It's like this barren wasteland where people are trying to find redemption after their death for things that were foisted upon them in their life, and eventually Juan gets implicated in this in certain ways and becomes like the town himself. I could not put this down. Like, I did not want to put this down. I just wanted to read this in one sitting. I think it was so impressive, and I am so happy I read this. 5 stars. I would highly recommend. Definitely talks about the idea of, I think, sins of the father being revisited upon the son. It's a perfect experience of bridging the past and the present, and like the book and Juan as well, I guess he's kind of like a medium for the town to re-experience itself, and it's really, really cool, like seeing people reduced to just stories. Finally, the last book I read in May is a manga, and it is Kitchen Princess. I love this. This is one of my new favorite manga series. I am obsessed with this. The manga is by Natsumi Ando, and then the story is by Miyuki Kobayashi. I love this so much. I bought this for myself a year ago, and then I finally got around to reading it, and I am so happy I did. I was so impressed with this. This book just made me so happy. This is volumes 1 and 2, so it's a bind-up of 1 and 2. I'm in love with it. So we follow this orphan named Najika, and she lives in Hokkaido at an orphanage, but her dream is to be the world's best pastry chef because she has a very unusual gift when it comes to cooking, baking, making food in general. And so she gets into a very prestigious academy. Very quickly, she meets 2 boys who are nice to her, and then pretty much everyone else at the school is just treating her atrociously. It's a very prestigious place where people excel in stuff like piano, dance. One of our main characters is a model, and so everyone really looks down on food consumption, cooking, the art of the food world. She's very quickly harassed, tormented, bullied, told that she's basically just a stain on their school. And so the first volume kind of follows her trying to prove herself, her deciding if she wants to stay at the school. It was so much fun. I cannot stress how fun this was. This whole manga is about making food. It comes with recipes. It is so charming. It is so satisfying to watch her make food. This manga does come with recipes as well. One of Najika's goals for going to the school in particular is that she is trying to find her flan prince, who was this boy when she was younger who made her, or no, who I guess just gave her flan on a day when she was really upset after her parents had just died, and it was the first time like she smiled again in so long because this flan was just so perfect, and now she's trying to find blind. And now she's trying to find this flan prince in her life and essentially cook him dessert as a thank you for making her smile with his flan. How nice is that? I just got more and more impressed with it because it deals a lot with like, it is a wild, fun adventure, but it also deals a lot with like the nature of food. The first volume, I would say, is more about just like enjoying food. Why do people cook? Why do people love cooking? How do you bake? And it's all about like the feelings that you get from eating with people. And it's like a very, I don't know, there's just like some cool things to study in here about food in general, because she is so happy when she sees other people happy when they eat her food. And it was all about like memories, connecting with people, experiencing food, and it was just really beautiful. And then the second volume actually explores topics of eating disorders, because there's someone at the school who has an eating disorder, and I was just like very impressed with it. And it just touched on a lot of topics surrounding food that are definitely really important, really interesting, really beautiful, really hard to talk about, and it just like captured it all while at the same time being so lovely, so fun. I desperately need to get my hands on the next volumes of this. I hope I can find them somewhere. Okay, hello. So it's actually a few days later, and wouldn't you know it, I've forgotten to talk about 2 books, because I actually read 15 books this month, and I think it does say a little bit that I did forget about them, but it actually worked out perfectly, because now you get a little sneak preview of my new camera. Do I know what I'm doing? No, but we're gonna figure it out together. Yes, I'm so stoked that this came in. I've been messing with it all day, but I just wanted to sit down and finish up this wrap up actually, so that's what we're gonna do. But hi, you're seeing what I actually look like, because this camera is just crazy. The first book I actually finished in May was XOXO by XEO. This is a young adult's K-drama romance. I think this one failed for me because the book was just so boring. The romance was so plain, so lackluster. It was not very realistic. There was no substance in it, right? Because in contrast to what I was talking about in Heartstopper, this book did not excel in any of those areas. As well, when you do try to capture the nature of a K-drama and all of the really highly intense emotional superficiality that is embedded into K-dramas, which I love, and I think it works amazing when you're watching them. I love K-dramas so much, and XOXO constantly makes reference to K-dramas, different ones, just tropes, stereotypes, the really, really ballooned up emotions that K-dramas possess, but I think it doesn't work when you translate it into a book, because it just translates over as cringe. It really does. This one we follow a girl named Jenny who's living in Los Angeles. She's Korean American. She lives with her mom. One night she meets this boy who's in her uncle's karaoke bar, and he won't leave, and so they have a karaoke off, and then they end up having this like night together doing fun stuff, going to a festival, and just having a good time. But at the end of the night he is whisked away in this like big black van or black limo or something, and she thinks it's a little sketchy. A few months later, she has to move to South Korea with her mom because her grandma is sick and needs some help. And lo and behold, when she gets into the very prestigious performing arts school in Seoul, who is there but Cheul, who is the guy that she met at her uncle's karaoke bar, and it turns out that he is in fact a member of XOXO, the K-pop group. And of course, this has a whole complication of things for their relationship, but honestly, I would just skip this one if I were you. Like, I did not feel any butterflies. I felt like the characters, especially Cheul, were just so stagnant, and I just really don't have any good things to say about this one. I gave it 2 stars. And then the other one I forgot to talk about was The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I don't know how I forgot about Steinbeck, because this was my first Steinbeck, and I would highly recommend, although I would say this is maybe a forgettable book because it is a short story, but The Pearl introduced me to Steinbeck, who is an author that I have been weary about, don't think I'll enjoy. I haven't heard anything good about him, but then I told you guys that I hadn't heard anything good about him, and everyone said good things about him, so thank you, because this was amazing. And I think I'll have to read some Steinbeck later on for my American Lit course. So this is a fable that is itself a retelling of, I think, a piece of Mexican folklore in which we're following Kino, who is this man who lives with his wife and their newly born son, and his job is to dive into the ocean and get pearls. Like, that's how he makes his living, along with a bunch of his other neighbors, is that they sell the pearls that they find in the ocean to the marketplace. But one day Kino dives down and he finds like this huge gargantuan pearl. Of course, this like ruptures relationships within his family, within his village. The people who buy the pearls from the men obviously try to swindle him, and so you follow Kino and his wife and his child on this adventure. Not really adventure, it's a very dark quest to try and profit off of this pearl so that they can have a better life, and so that their son can have a better life, and you follow the trials that they have to go through. The ending is just It's a very upsetting, very sad, tragic tale, and I think what really made this come alive was Steinbeck's writing. I think it was beautiful. I would highly recommend the audiobook. The narrator was fantastic for this, and I did give it, I think I gave this 3.5 stars just because it was like a very short snippet into Steinbeck's world, but I was so impressed. I really loved his writing, like I cannot stress. It was so bluntly beautiful. I haven't read Hemingway, but I feel like Steinbeck's writing is like a little bit of a foil to Hemingway's, in that it's that same bluntness, like just smack you on the head with a hammer, but it's like beautiful, which is really nice. So it was so succinct, so to the point. You could tell it was like a very masterful storyteller telling you the story. So really, really love this. But in the end, it was one, I guess, that I forgot. So I don't know what that says, but I had a great time while I was listening to it. So now we've actually come to the end of everything I read in May, and I'm gonna leave it to yesterday's Emma to take it away from you. But yes, that is everything that I picked up in May. I have like 5 books that I'm like this close to finishing, but I didn't want to just throw them on here because I wanted to give you my full thoughts when I was done them. So yes, please let me know what you read this month. What was your favorite? As usual, I love getting your recommendations. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Ciao.